Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on traditional Wolastoqey territory. The territory of the Wolastoqey people are recognized in the peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. I'm Morgan Peters, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this keynote address and fireside chat with Canada's Minister of Industry, the Honourable Mélanie Joly. I'd also like to recognize the other dignitaries joining us today. The Honourable Krista Ross, Senator for New Brunswick, David Miles, MP for Fredericton.
Woohoo!
Woohoo indeed. Kate Rogers, Mayor of Fredericton, Clinton Sharp, Mayor of Arcadia, and Mike Pope, the Deputy Mayor of New Maryland. I'd also like to thank UNB, our generous partner for this event, and Planet Hatch for hosting us in their beautiful location here. The Honourable Mélanie Joly was first elected to the House of Commons in 2015. She had previously served as Minister of Economic Development, Minister responsible for ACOA, Minister of Tourism, Official Languages, La Francophonie, and Minister of Canadian Heritage. In her ministerial role, she has worked to promote Canadian culture and to grow and increase the visibility of Canada's tourism sector. She has also worked to safeguard Canada's 2 official languages while promoting the use of French in Canada and around the world, including in the digital sphere. Prior to entering federal politics, Minister Joly founded the Vrai Changement pour Montréal party and ran for Mayor of Montreal in 2013 under its banner. And arguably most importantly, participated in a webinar for our chamber during the very early days of COVID in 2020. She remembers. Minister Joly holds an honors Bachelor of Law from the Université de Montréal and a Magister Juris in European and Comparative Law from the University of Oxford. She's the author of Changing the Rules of the Game, in which she shares her vision for public policy and civic engagement, and she was named Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. But other than that.
How was the Foreign Affairs Minister?
Pardon me?
How was the Foreign Affairs Minister?
Foreign Affairs Minister, my apologies. It's easy to be humble in my role when I get to read bios like this about the week. Anyway, without further ado, please welcome Minister Joly.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Can you hear me? Is this working? Hello? On the other one? Okay. Okay, just give me a second. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Well, thank you, Morgan. Sorry, I won't go. Sorry for the media. I'm doing this TED Talk way. Okay. You know, at one point, after 10 years being a minister in the cabinet, you just do it your own way. I'm happy to meet great people, but also it's the land of my mentor, which is Frank McKenna, and I speak to Frank nearly every week, and so I've been, developing this plan while working with him a lot. So if you see a bit of McKenna through that, don't be surprised. So the idea today was to talk to you about what's our plan, what's going on in the world, obviously, and how do we react? Because, I think I'm in front of you as business leaders, and there's a simple truth that we all know, which is basically the economic strength of a country is that strong, the national strength of a country is as strong as its economic strength. So obviously, the economic strength is the backbone of our national strength. So in that sense, we need to make sure that we work on the economy, because we know that internationally the old playbook doesn't work anymore. And we live in a much more complicated and complex and dangerous world. And I've seen it firsthand, because I've been on the diplomatic front of the trade tensions, and now I'm on the economic front of these trade tensions. I used to be working much more on the causes, and now I'm working on the consequences. And over the past 4 years, I've seen the beginning of wars and also just the entire security architecture of the world becoming much more vulnerable, much more weakened. And at the same time, I've seen trade tensions increase. And meanwhile, we need to work together on economic growth. It's very important. And why is it so important? It's because it's for us to be able to offer ourselves a just society. Social programs, a social safety net, for Canadians to be supporting each other, caring for one another, trusting each other. And that's why, meanwhile, we need to make sure that we have the means to do that. And so while there will continue to have lots of uncertainty and unpredictability in the world, there are things we cannot control, but there are lots of things we can control. And so we'll focus on that. We'll focus on what we can control. And what is that? Well, it's our mission, which is building one strong Canadian economy. And we have everything any country on earth would love to have. The best people, great talent, lots of natural resources, the right technology, and of course, peace, order, and good government. And so, let's play it to our strengths. Here's the plan. We will protect, we will create, and we will attract. So, on va protéger, on va créer, et on va attirer. Voici notre plan de match. So let me start with the first pillar of the plan. We will protect. We will protect jobs. We will protect industries. And of course, as we all know, our beloved Dominic LeBlanc is in Washington doing the negotiations with the Americans right now. And that, as these trade talks are evolving, we know we have sectors that are really affected. Here in New Brunswick, softwood lumber. In Ontario, auto. Steel and aluminum across the country, and also copper. And so, we need to be there for workers, and we need to be there for these industries. And so short term, what are we doing? We're protecting the market, making sure there's no dumping. And we're offering support, and I'll have more to say on softwood lumber soon. At the same time, middle term, we're helping these industries to adapt and pivot. And they can pivot towards new markets, and they can pivot towards also new products. And we're putting $5 billion on the table through the Strategic Response Fund to support the big industries, the big companies. And for small and medium-sized businesses, we're putting also $1 billion on the table, which is really important. And that funding is through either our banks or a COA. And longer term, we need to build a stronger domestic market. We're too dependent on the US. And so in that sense, we need to have major projects which will be using steel, aluminum, lumber from Canada. We need to make sure also that we invest more in building Canada homes, and so all our housing plan. And we want to invest more in defense, and we have a Buy Canada policy. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a big steel plant in Ontario that is called Algoma. It's in Sault Ste. Marie. It is key for the region, it's key for the country. It's actually the only steel plant that is Canadian owned. And so we helped them recently with $400 million of support. But meanwhile, after discussions with Irving Shipyard in Halifax, they got their first order of Canadian steel out of Irving 2 weeks ago. And finally, our ships, our Arctic icebreakers, will be built with Canadian steel. We need more of that in the country. And I've been having conversations with Jim Irving and with the CEO of Irving Shipyard to make sure that that's the case. Another example of diversification. So an aluminum plant in Quebec, which is called Alouette. Q1 of this year, 4% of its production was being sent to Europe. Q2, 57% of its production was being sent to Europe. The entire business model of that aluminum plant, like all aluminum plants and all our steel plants and a lot of lumber, was linked to the US. And so diversification can happen. It's not easy, but it can happen. And so when it comes to softwood, good news, we've worked with the banks, and in the coming days, the support will be able to be rolled out and backstopped by the BDC. So that's for supporting right now our businesses to make sure that it will stay afloat. But meanwhile, we will make sure that we work on a Buy Canadian policy to have our homes and our major projects and our infrastructure being built with the great softwood from New Brunswick. I think that's worth a round of applause. So, keeping in mind that we're protecting jobs, we have to do this. We have to do it for the sake of our workers, the sake of our industries, and the sake of our countries. Donc, on va être là pour nos travailleurs qui sont victimes des tarifs et on va les aider tout au courant des négociations. So, I've talked to you about the first phase of the plan, first part of the plan, which is protect. Let's talk about how do we create jobs at a time where there's lots of unpredictability. Well, in every crisis, there's an opportunity, and we need to seize it now. I think we need to act with audacity, with determination, and a sense of purpose. And so, thinking of this idea of what we can control, well, we'll concentrate on that. We have control over these events. And so, we know that we will be investing in defense like never before. 3.5% of our GDP, billions of dollars every year. And when I think about defense, you have to bear in mind that it's a large definition of defense. It's dealing with, obviously, our sovereignty in the air, on land, and on sea, but also it is cyber, but it's also the impacts of climate change, like wildfires or pandemics. So basically, everything that is linked to health. Why? Because the definition of defense needs to be linked to dealing with all the threats our country could be facing. And so, in that sense, I think that there are many sectors that can benefit from it. We're working on a new defense industrial strategy. What is the defense industrial strategy, how can I say, vision? Well, it's to buy, it's to build, and it's to partner. And Morgan heard that because he was at the Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Chamber of Commerce conversation. But when I talk about buying, what does that mean? Well, we're buying submarines right now, second biggest procurement in our history after fighter jets. It's at this point either between a company that is a German-Norwegian consortium called TKMS or a Korean company called Hanwha. Well, we will be purchasing these submarines. We need to make sure that supply chains are being developed here in the country and that these companies work with Canadian companies to make sure that there is Canadian content in these subs. So that's an example of buy. How we can build. Well, the national shipbuilding strategy has been going on for 15 years. We've seen it, and at this point, we know that Irving and Davie and also Seaspan in Vancouver are building one of the best ships on Earth. And trust me, I've seen a lot of shipyards and issues linked to shipyards. We need to make sure that not only do they build for the Canadian Armed Forces, they can do more. They should be exporting. They should be selling to other countries. Because by the way, we're not the only ones increasing our defense spending. All NATO countries are. 3.5% is actually a market being created by all countries in Europe and of course in North America. And I really think that we are already building the fantastic water bombers for the satellites, the AI. I'm giving examples of, so the water bombers is in Calgary, it's the Avalon, the satellites is MDA in Montreal, and Cohere is also an AI company that is going to be competing with OpenAI and Anthropic, which is, big names in the industry, which is based out of the GTA in Toronto. And so that's for the build part. And then for the partner, well, one of the best surveillance plane being developed right now is a partnership between Bombardier and Saab, a Swedish company. It's called the Global Eye. And I really think that we can continue to do more of that, partnering with companies that are from different parts of the world, and that can strengthen also our own capacity. And so we need to see more of that. Donc, on veut faire en sorte de pouvoir acheter, de pouvoir bâtir, et de pouvoir faire des partenariats. And so I really think that we can build the ships, the planes, the AI, the right tech, and all the supply chains. And we can have researchers, engineers, and welders, all supported by these new investments. We'll have the BDC, the Research Council, and the Canadian Space Agency working on it and making sure that we keep on the momentum. We've created a new defense investment agency 2 weeks ago. We have now a new CEO, and we need to go ahead. Because at the end of the day, what I heard, and I used to be in business before being in politics, is companies rather have contracts than subsidies. And the idea behind this defense industrial strategy is the use of procurement as a great lever to ultimately create jobs. And so we think that through this defense industrial strategy, we'll be able to create thousands of jobs across the country. And I want to make sure that New Brunswick gets its part and its fair share, like we say, where I come from in Quebec. So yesterday, David, Susan Holt, and I were talking about how we can make sure that we land good investments here. I think that there's great opportunities, particularly when it comes to research and Borealis, but I think we could think much more outside the box. You guys have Gagetown, which is a fantastic base. There's going to be lots of investments at the base, obviously in infrastructure, but I think that we could build on that, that strength that New Brunswick has, and I think we could be creative and we can attract good projects. So we'll work on things and we'll get back to you on that too. And meanwhile, of course, if you have any ideas, we're extremely open to it. So let's talk now about major projects. That's the second way of creating jobs. Because we know that we have this mission of creating one great Canadian, one strong Canadian economy. We've passed a bill, C5. We also have a project office at this point and a president, all that within 3 months. So we've also announced 5 first projects in energy and mining and transport. And just these 5 projects will generate $60 billion worth of private investments. So we know that through capitalizing these private investments, we can also create thousands of jobs. And so we need to make sure that New Brunswick has also a very strong major project. And not only one, I think, many. And I've heard great ideas with mines being developed, or also the Port of St. John, the Port of Belledune. We want to be able to partner with you because we know that this is the moment to attract private capital and meanwhile use our support, obviously the federal support, but also the fact that we have this legislation to fast track approval that will make a huge difference in terms of clarity and predictability of investments. And that, in this unpredictable world, is something that is definitely a strength that we have. And so the next round of projects is coming up at the breakup, November 16th. And so it's coming very fast, within a month. And we know that we, again, can create thousands of jobs in engineering, in construction, in manufacturing, but also build the supply chains and the communities. And of course, we'll be working with Indigenous groups, Indigenous communities. We want to make sure that they have an important place at the decision table because they need to be able to have access to equity in projects in order also to develop great levers of economic development to further also the development of their own communities. And we think that this is reconciliation in action. So we also know that through all these major projects, we'll increase the demand in steel, aluminum, and also possibly, depending on the project, lumber as well. And finally, the third way to create jobs is, I think, by building great Canadian companies. And I come from a place in the country where we do have great Canadian companies, the CGI, CAE, Bombardier, and Alimentation Couche-Tard. And we've, you know, where in Quebec, we've used also the power of the pension plan plan to actually invest in these companies. And that has de-risked a lot of the companies. And so I really think that we need to continue to build great global Canadian companies, such as McCain, such as Thomson Reuters, such as Maple Leaf Foods, Aritzia, Lululemon. And you may think, why is she talking to me about big companies right now? Because SMEs are important. I think we need to do both, but I think we should promote big companies abroad. We need to make sure also that we open markets for them, that we help them grow, and that they can be strong here at home, but also around the world. Because in this unpredictable world, we need to make sure that we have strong private sector champions, because we're competing in terms of influence, not only government to government, but also private sector to private sector, particularly as there are trade tensions. The more we're able to have really big global champions, more we'll be able to have also a part of the growth that the world is actually going through. And so, finally, after protecting jobs and creating jobs, we can attract. And we can attract what? Attract talent and attract investments. And so, as other countries are undermining their own academic freedom and also cutting in research and cutting in science, we will invest and we will double down. Because we believe in science and we believe in research. And I was with Paul this morning, and with you, David, at the University of New Brunswick, and we were having that very conversation. Because there are great plans at the university, we want to support them, and we know that the university in Fredericton has a lot of impact on creating growth and basically creating an entire ecosystem of people around the university. And so we will attract the best talent in the world. And meanwhile, we'll continue to support our homegrown talent. And so I'll have more to say in the coming weeks about that very subject. And finally, we'll attract investments. We'll attract investments, and as investors are trying to reduce their exposure to certain markets because there's too much unpredictability, we will help them de-risk. And so we will offer investment certainty. We'll cut on red tape. We'll make sure that there's more transparency. We're speeding up permitting, working with provinces, working also with Indigenous communities, and I just talked to you about C5. And at the end of the day, we will be a stable environment, stable jurisdiction with no surprises, which is extremely important. And that will help us create more opportunities. We'll be open for business. We'll attract more foreign direct investments from Europe, from Asia, from the Gulf states. And this will be good for Canadians and good for Indigenous communities. We will also be hawkish on competition because affordability is an issue. We know that, and we need to bring prices down, particularly in certain sectors, including telecommunications. And trust me, we're on that. But at this point, when you look at our plan attracting investment, it's working, because the CEO of CPPIB, which is one of the major Canadian pension funds, just mentioned 2 weeks ago, we continue to see Canada as one of the best places in the world to put capital to work. So I think that we're on a good path. So I look forward to continuing the conversation, but my message to you is, let's build one strong Canadian economy by protecting, by creating, and by attracting. And I want you to bring your best ideas. Challenge me. Challenge us. Because these are not abstract policies. We have a vision. We have a plan. These are real investments to create real jobs, real growth right here at home. So we're dealing with a generational challenge, and I can't underestimate how much it is a generational challenge. We have no time to lose. So let's work together and let's make it happen. Thank you. You want me to go down? Now that's the tough part.
doesn't get any tougher than me, I assure you. Thank you so much for those opening comments. I do think the industrial strategy speaks to the moment, protecting jobs, creating new ones, and attracting global talent investment.
Yep.
I also, of course, agree that Fredericton, New Brunswick is well positioned to be a contributor to that, to the factors that you say. So, in the 20 minutes or so we have here, I'd like to dig into those regional realities and how we can continue to be a contributor. So let's start off with the elephant in every room. How do you envision tariff relief and tech-driven job creation reshaping Canada's industrial landscape in the next 5 years?
Well, so I've talked about protecting jobs, Morgan, because I was referring to the industries that are targeted right now. And there are some, and I mentioned which one. We know them: steel, aluminum, auto, copper, and softwood. For the rest of our economy, and I don't want to underestimate these tariffs, they're really important. They're called the 232 tariffs, and that's what is being negotiated right now in Washington.
But for the rest of our economy, there are no tariffs. And that's contrary to what we're seeing with the UK, with 10% tariffs on all their economy, the EU 15% on all their economy, Japan 15% on all their economy, and India 50% on all their economy. Okay, so it's not an easy time, but at the same time, we have the best deal right now. One thing that is clear, though, is that there are no tariffs on tech and services, because, and that's really important to remember. And so we need to make sure that we are able not only to develop our tech sector even more, but we need to work more on our data sovereignty and AI sovereignty. There are 3 countries on Earth right now that really are competitive in AI. You know what? Canada is part of that. And that was because of sustained investments on the part of the government of Canada over the past 30 years, but I must say, particularly in the last 10 years, in AI. We have Jeffrey Hinton, we have the best talent in research. Now, the problem Canada has a lot is commercialization. Sorry, it's my French. La commercialisation, commercialization. See, I just say it very quickly, commercialization.
I'm from Newfoundland, I'm familiar with saying it.
So that's where, my colleague Evan Solomon comes in, and I work with him to make sure that there can be AI adoption by companies. And at the same time, it will help the tech sector. So, because tech is in everything, but folks, AI will be in everything. And AI adoption will be about our productivity and our competitiveness. And so this is something that we're very, very focused on.
We were chatting back briefly about our chamber's work over the last year or so on positioning the knowledge industry that we have here in Fredericton, working with our tech sector, our innovation sector, post-secondary institutions, and a couple of big ones that I think that speaks to on the productivity question in particular is defense and housing. I think you covered defense pretty well in your opening comments.
Yeah.
How do you see the innovation and knowledge industry boosting housing as an economic driver?
Yeah, and you know what, fair point on tech. Our investments in defense will be able to help the tech sector, because a lot of the technological investments in the US have gone through the fact that the Pentagon for years was giving sometimes the first contract to a startup to develop its operations, its business model, basically its technology. And a lot of the technology is dual use. It can be civilian, and at the same time defense related. And so I think also the investments in defense will be actually very helpful. And Borealis, which is the initiative on the tech sector to do that from the Department of Defense, working with my department, is a very useful tool. And I really, really think there's a great project coming from here in New Brunswick to attract much more investments in tech, in defense, and in research. And David and I, have had conversations about it. but I really, really think that we need to continue to push. On housing, well, I think we've built the agency, Build Canada Homes. We were able to do that within 3 months. We now have a president in charge of it, and we need to really go faster. The project is to be nearly building 4 million houses before, well, until 2031. So it's fast. There's, you know, we need to, the population is growing, affordability is an issue. People are frustrated with the cost of living and also the cost of mortgages and rents. Good news, the interest rates have gone down. We're working on building much more, you know, more houses quickly. We are announcing the catalog also of prefabricated, like basically being able to show here how you can quickly build a home that will help the construction industry. We're trying to industrialize it, you know, make it faster and less linked to hours spent by a given person on a project. And I think New Brunswick has a great opportunity here to seize on housing, to export to the rest of the country also, the prefabricated product, the know-how. And so I think this is definitely a strength that you should be even more pushing. And I think, you know, seeing other provinces across the country, they would be very interested. And so you know, sending either you, Morgan, or going in with a delegation of people to Quebec, to Ontario, to BC, everybody's struggling with the same issue of building houses, homes, quickly at a faster pace, but also much more like at lower costs. And I think that would be a good idea for you and your team to work on.
Yeah, and with our partners at UNB too is my first thought.
Yeah,
We
that's
have
it.
Offsite modular unit right now that's
Yeah.
marrying the knowledge industry with those needs.
Yeah, and Brandon and Jeff was presenting that this morning, and I know some of them are here today.
Of course, they're great partners of ours.
Yeah.
Speaking of UNB, so you may know, a couple of weeks ago we partnered with them on a 2-day conference called Shaping the Debate, the Knowledge Industry Shift.
Yeah.
And through that we explored how artificial intelligence, robotics, digital transformation are reshaping the future of work, productivity,
Yep.
and how we see the knowledge industry as being foundational to economic resilience and growth. And I think the new industrial strategy speaks specifically to those themes.
Yep.
How does your strategy support smaller urban centers like ours with that knowledge industry base to help scale up and attract global investment? We ought to talk about, to your point on bigger companies and SMEs, we talk a lot about knowledge, innovation being the key to turning smalls into mediums and mediums into larges, and larges into even bigger. So can you speak to that a little bit?
So
please?
I'll talk about the research environment, and then I'll talk about much more business environment. On the research environment, so we're working on a talent attraction strategy. So that's the idea. Now I can't talk more about it because obviously there's a budget, and you know I have too much ambition in life for the Prime Minister to be mad at me. But the idea is to make sure that that's it. But obviously, I think Europe has developed its own strategy to attract talent. The UAE recently, we have to be able to do that as well. And I think we have a great opportunity. But the goal is not to attract talent only in the big centers, such as Toronto. We need to be able to attract talent across the country. And I think, you know, the University of New Brunswick is really well positioned. But that was my very conversation with Paul this morning to make sure that you guys are ready, should that happen. So that's for much more the research environment. But so you know also, in 2024, in the budget, we had the biggest investments in science in decades. And so that was also helpful for a National Research Council to be able to provide grants across the country as well. So that was also, well, we're thinking of attracting talent. We've just made the investment with our own homegrown talents. And because it starts from there, and then the moment people are, you know, in the right position, then we can also look outside. And that's why I think we're in a good position right now. On the, you know, business side, I think that, you know, I'm trying to find ways to, I think, how can I say, re-empower manufacturing sector. And obviously this is what the President Trump is trying to do. But I think that the overall Western countries need to do more. And so, thank you for listening. I'm teasing you. It happens to the best of us. So, you know, what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do is to be able to use the levers that are at our disposal. And that's why the major projects, that's why, you know, the defense industrial strategy and building global champions. Now, I'm really open to having your comments on that, because the problem we've seen in the country is that we have good companies and then they get bought. Or, you know, they never grow to the level that we're able to support them. And so while we have made all the investments in them, eventually, you know, we lose them. So we've put in place a growth fund to help companies scale. So we have like lots of support for startups. We've put more support in the scaling up. But I'm really interested in having your perception on how can we make sure that ultimately they become even bigger. And I've started that conversation with major banks and major pension funds, because I think that, well, they've been looking for yield and finding ways to create growth for their own pensioners. Well, I think they can have a conversation with their pensioners saying, you know what if we invest more in the Canadian market? Are you supportive of that? Because right now they invest around the world, a lot. They're worth $3 trillion of investments, and imagine if they would invest even more in Canada. So you know, my goal is not to use a stick against them. I don't believe in that, but I really think that contract, that social contract between pensioners, beneficiaries of pension funds, and the pension funds themselves could be, you know, discussed. Because I really think, I don't know what you think, but I really think that we're in this moment of everybody is much more in support of our Canadian companies, our Canadian economy, and basically being in this moment of solidarity that is so key for us to go through these turbulent times. So I think that's also another way.
I'd be happy to provide robust comments following up on that. I think to your point, part of the short answer is using those proactive policy levers to create that culture change. We talk about that locally here and now on a national scale. I do want to touch on the, without putting your career ambitions on the line, the talent attraction strategy, and specifically in terms of a conversation we've had quite a bit here is recognizing the importance of AI and how that's going to be involved throughout work. How equally, at the same time, we have to remain focused on communication skills, to put it bluntly, and social sciences and humanities are actually kind of more important than ever now, and it's not an other thing, but that's going to be critical to harnessing that power. Can you speak to that a little bit, if that's going to be part of that strategy?
Yeah, well, you know, I think in terms of talent attraction, we should be looking at every single sectors. And we have 3 research councils, one of which is based on humanities, and we should be supporting the 3. That's how I see it. I think that the fact that AI is coming up and becoming much more present in our lives, and the impact of technology on education, on our kids, etc., is something that needs a lot of research on. And I think that it's a question of creating. See, at the beginning of my speech, I was doing a link between economic growth and why we're doing this. Because fundamentally, we need to be in a society where people understand each other. People can accept sometimes differences and still trust each other. A society where the growth is being shared in a way that people feel they have their fair share, that there's more equality. That's how I see things, definitely, and that's why also I'm involved in politics. And so I think that, to your point of what do we do in terms of investing in humanities, well, I think that we need to be able to do on the both sides of the spectrum. Technology is a tool. It's not an end. And so it's what you do with the technology that actually has an impact in your society. And I think that, I'm a lawyer, so I come from, I guess, the humanities background, so I'm in favor of it. But I really see the fact that it's both. It's not one or the other.
Totally agree. I too am a lawyer. That's why I came to Fredericton. My sympathies to you as well.
We can't be all musicians, David.
The timekeeper's eye is burning a hole in me, so I'm going to jump to my concluding question.
Yeah.
Which is, what does success look like for the industrial strategy at the end of the day, and how can communities like Fredericton and provinces like New Brunswick contribute to its success?
Well, I think, we need to protect jobs, so the jobs being protected and being able to keep companies afloat while they're going through this crisis. And so the softwood lumber industry is something that I'm very much following, particularly here in New Brunswick. And, there are certain aspects of these industries that are extremely important, because if we lose them, it's actually sometimes our national security that is at risk. Because if one day Canada is not in time of peace, we need to have steel plants, we need to have aluminum plants, we need to have lumber also. So that's one thing. Second thing, we need to be able also to create jobs. And I think we can, but we have to go fast. And that's why, it's not even 6 months and we're coming up with the defense and industrial strategy, because we need to ramp up our investments. And meanwhile, if we don't, we will be buying from the Americans or buying from Europeans. Well, we could be creating jobs here at home. That would be extremely naive. And folks, I'm a progressive progressive politician. And so we're investing in defense to keep peace at home. It's not defense for defense. It's because we need to show deterrence. And we need to be able to not take peace for granted. And so that's for, creating jobs. And, it's the same for major projects. It's being able to, I think that's clearly the metrics. And for and attracting talent and investment is all linked also to the first two pillars. So at the end of the day, I hope that I can come in, a year back to Fredericton to say, hey, here's what we've done. And I've already said to my team, I want to make sure that every 3 months I'm able to come up to the Canadian public and say, here are the metrics. Here how the plan is being rolled out. Here are the impacts. Here are the jobs that are being created. Here are the plants that we were able to save. And, and I need your help, Morgan, and the help of the Chamber to also provide that data to us. Because, and if the plan is not perfect, I said, you guys challenge me or challenge us. Because this is an ongoing, it's a fluid context, it's an ongoing situation, so we will adapt and pivot like we're asking our private sector to do.
I'm an unbelievably helpful and challenging guy.
I have no doubt, Morgan, no doubt.
So thank you for coming, your comments here today, your candor.
Yeah.
I hear a lot that I like within the industrial strategy for our community: research, innovation, cybersecurity, defense, knowledge industry. We have the tools here to contribute nationally, and look forward to working with you and your government on what that's going to look like moving forward. And welcome to come back anytime, of course. Thank you also to our partner, University of New Brunswick, on this event, Planet Hatch for hosting us, all of you for coming here today, and looking forward to continuing the conversation and the collaboration.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you all.